My relationship to feminist imaginaries derives from the common experiences of women, young and old.
Different ways of thinking, of tackling things, of expressing oneself. The feminist imaginary opens up avenues. Words are important, so are images. So are moving our bodies and feeling our emotions.
Lately, I've seen a lot of images of funeral pyre burning. The news is scary and sometimes I'm a wreck. As I take refuge in the world of women and children, of mothers and grandmothers, I imagine how different these images would be if we were feminist enough.
Women bleeding, loving, and birthing. Women weeping for those who are lost and celebrating those who are yet to be. Women creating, nurturing, giving of their hearts, minds, bodies, and spirits. Women fighting to be heard and fighting for others to be heard. Women creating a future that is better than the one they have known.
What is now left for the next generation? A world that demands from them isolation. Under the mask of it all, to not be able to smile at strangers, to maintain distance from the very people they could call friends one day. Reminding them that air isn't free and neither are they. That schools fit in a box and playgrounds aren't real.
Different ways to tell a narrative that's been long framed for us women. We have our own voices. We are knowers.
It's not new. It's a magnification of the oppression in its deed. So I think it's time that we let women speak.
Women, we have our own voices. We are knowers. Women, we have our own voices. We are knowers. Women, we have our own voices. We are knowers. Now listen to us.
Imagining a better world together.
A single story is a dangerous narrative. I am of my mother, but my father is honored by the taking of his name and the putting aside the mothering lineage that gave seed a place. To tell another story, to retell the story, to restory the story for only one version is a dangerous thing.
A true feminist is a sister, a friend. I had no female friends. My schoolmates bullied me, and I was not ready for conflict then, when it was the right moment.
Artifacts of my stories mediate my feelings, memories that threaten to rupture the safety of stories I've carefully crafted over years. I tell of a herring rake my father made that evokes laughter, that covers up lots of feelings I try to bury. The story keeps arising, and I shape it into something palatable.
What is your relationship to feminist imaginaries? My relationship with feminist imaginaries is recent, but it's also the part of me that I didn't know existed. Sometimes I don't feel like a feminist. What does it even mean to be a feminist? Can I be true to myself and the other women when I call myself a feminist? To embody the word means to become an empowered being with the agency to forge ahead and survive a patriarchal society.
The story of seed that takes its place in a fertile home, becoming what its seeding desires, many possibilities. One story is too dangerous, one fixed in time and in the words of the storyteller. Breaking the story while telling it may be closer to what the old bards did before it was put into stone.
There were no feminists in the province where I lived.
I tell stories that come from childhood, that at the same time evoke memories and rupture the containment that is my life. I am sometimes afraid to create responses in others that will provoke anger or ridicule. I stay silent. I try to stay calm, but my face all too often reveals what I intend to hide.
But do I also feed into the patriarchal society? You bet I do. Even that has some meaning to me. A feeling, the feeling of am I doing myself justice? Am I being a true feminist if I'm acceptable of feeding a patriarchal society?
The stone, as the narrative, is dangerous. No one stone is the same, no narrative mimics another, even when the story is told the same way every time. There are multiplicities locked in stones. Remember differently. The rupture is not dangerous. It is how the wound is healed, a liquid flow before it becomes an object for another telling.
Later, I met the intellectual bourgeois feminists in Milan and always felt excluded, an outsider. I was afraid to show my fundamental ignorance.
So I am left with swirling fragments of joy, tempered by anger or fear, humor that quickly devolves into shame. Where am I left? Who am I actually? And what should I remember? What thought should I dance with? And what should I dance away from?
What does it mean to be a feminist? Why do I feel the need to fit a standard? Why does being a feminist researcher, scholar, always become a question?
The story of the cherry blossom tree I see out of my window. It tells the story of two women, a mother and a daughter. The mother wants the tree removed. For 20 years, she complains about its leaves and how it blocks her view beyond. The daughter loves the cherry blossom and anticipates its arrival every spring. Its fleeting beauty.
I feel the color. I start to look at the blocks on Zoom and the patterns of books, backgrounds, haircuts, like in an art gallery. The cat, the snail, the stone.
My stories never get a full picture. It's always looked at and tell and distorted by others and get pieces. So my stories never come up with my voice, my own ways, my experience, and with my reality.
Feminism cannot simply be about challenging gendered assumptions and conventions about women. It must be intersectional or it is incomplete. The intersectional feminist imaginary encompasses both traumas and privileges, requiring those with privileges to shoulder responsibilities for having privilege, and standing aside to leave space open for those healing traumas to do what they need to.
Exactly, says Mutti. The blossom hardly lasts any time at all, and the leaves and the fallen blossom are all to clear up. The mother dies after 20 years. The following spring, the tree dies. No leaves appear after winter, no blossom.
I did not see very well. I want to go back. Fantastic to have fun together. Pause, pause, pause. What is the horizon? What is the difference between practices? Or are these all variations? Are we all variations of an imaginary?
I don't have a safe space for my own, wherever or whenever I am. My sense of insecurity, dominance, and control by others, both in private and public life.
We respect each other. We hold space for each other.
Ivy is strangling the tree. It is an oppressor hidden from view. Its hold was masked when the tree was alive. Mutti asked for 20 years. Her wish was denied. But after Mutti had passed, her wish came true. How could it have happened?
What would my mother say about this? Or my aunt and my neighbor? I saw that women from the mountains in Calabria still wore traditional clothes in 1946 when they first voted. First time in their life, in the history of this country. Colors. What happened to pride? Sing louder.
A sense of feeling, I'm standing alone in an island against the tide. But still I get hope and courage looking at the world. So many feminist sisters are around with me to fight for our cause. স্রোতের বিপরীতে এই দীর্ঘ পথ চলা, সেনাবাহিনী থেকে আকাশে উড্ডয়মান, তবু নারীর জীবনের যে অন্ধকার, তাকে ঘিরে যে ধর্ম রাজনীতি, শক্তি রাজনীতি, আধিপত্যবাদের কিছুই মুছে যায়নি। কোন শক্তির কাছে মুক্ত চিন্তা, মুক্ত বুদ্ধির মানুষেরা বারবার পরাজিত হই? মনে হয় নোম্যান্স আইল্যান্ডে দাঁড়িয়ে আছি একা। শিক্ষা, মানবতা, যুক্তি, বিজ্ঞান সব ধীরে ধীরে হারিয়ে যাচ্ছে, তবু সভ্যতার গভীরে লুকিয়ে থাকা প্যাট্রিয়ার্কি, আধিপত্যের বিকল্প অনুসন্ধান করে যাব। নারী নিজেই নেবে নিজের অধিকার, মূল্যবোধের ক্ষমতা কেন্দ্রে আঘাত করে তছনছ করে দিয়ে নির্মাণ করব নবাঞ্চল।
We inspire others to see ourselves in the imaginative sharing to create empathy and transformation.
I was looking so forward to a conversation about to take place on CBC radio in a talk show. It was to be with three women who had, like me, chosen not to have children, not for health reasons, but simply by choice. It was a delightful hour, and I loved hearing from women who felt and thought like me, because at that time, there seemed to be so few of us, or if there were, we remained silent in our childlessness.
At the moment, I can't help remembering my mother, who I found out this morning from my sister has had another fall. When I think of the feminist imaginary, I always think of my mother, the woman that became an electrical engineer in World War II, but then was somehow convinced to marry and start a family as soon as the war was over. But Peggy retained a very strong feminism in some ways that was in part probably nurtured by living with a group of women in an RAAF base, a RAF base at Uran Quinty. What unceded land was that?
Nei mesi scorsi, in una conferenza Zoom, ho ascoltato la testimonianza di una donna che ha scelto di non avere figli. Era stata la prima volta che ascoltavo una storia del genere. Le sue parole mi hanno toccato.
The following week, the host returned, and his voice was, well, very different, in fact, extremely altered. He explained that he had hosted some of the most difficult and divisive conversations over his 30 years of time on radio. He had never received the volume, literally thousands, nor the extreme messages filled with hate that he had read and heard following his conversation with the three women who had chosen not to have children.
The remembering room. Remembering is such a strong feeling, an etching, deep, acidic, fumes, smells, the scent of memory, the cooking for weddings, the fish dishes for my wedding from the fish that Willie caught. How does this connect with feminism? The girl who married at 19 and had a daughter at 20 and then tried to be an artist.
Attualmente in Italia i media, i politici e i giornali parlano del calo della natalità solo come un grande problema. Io, che non ho figli, vorrei ascoltare le storie delle donne senza pensare che le loro scelte possono rappresentare un problema da risolvere per il nostro paese, che continuiamo a chiamare patria.
As I listened to what the commentator was reading, to the death threats and to the messages of sheer violence, I began to sob. My husband found me crying in the kitchen. He asked me what was wrong, and I said, they are talking about me. The next day, on my way to the university, I felt for the very first time in my life a deep fear on the street. What if the thousands of people knew that I was one of those who had chosen not to have children? The feminist imaginary has to be about tackling this hate and fear. We have a choice.
This takes me to the cog and the connections and repair, that were apparent in that piece on remembering in the remembering room. Connections between a great-granddaughter and a great-grandmother and the rewriting of a story that needed rewriting. Connections between a mother and her son, and a woman from the city and a man from a village. Back to my mother, Peggy. She's in hospital and she's had another fall, and I'm really worried about her.
The feminist imaginary significa per me legittimare le scelte, le non scelte, le paure e i desideri di ogni donna, bella così com'è.